Shame is one of those emotions we rarely want to talk about. It hides in the corners of our lives, disguised as hesitation, perfectionism, defensiveness, or even silence. Unlike guilt, which points to something we did, shame cuts deeper. It whispers that something is wrong with who we are, and when it goes unchecked, it quietly dictates the choices we make, the relationships we form, and the opportunities we avoid. Think of a time when you felt you weren't enough, maybe at work when your ideas weren't acknowledged, maybe in love when you feared rejection, maybe in childhood when a mistake brought more ridicule than guidance. Those moments leave an imprint. Over time, they don't just stay memories. They grow into an inner voice that shapes how you move through life. Shame becomes like an invisible director of your daily story. You may think you're acting out of free will, but often it's shame steering your actions. For many people, shame shows up as a constant need to prove worth. It can drive someone to overachieve, to never rest, because the moment they stop, they fear being seen as inadequate. Others cope by withdrawing, avoiding attention, keeping dreams small because standing out feels too risky. Some turn their shame outward, using criticism or control as a shield. The tragedy is that shame convinces us to live as someone we're not, all to avoid being seen as we truly are. In relationships, shame can be especially destructive. It makes intimacy hard because intimacy requires being known. If deep down you believe something about you is unlovable, you'll keep part of yourself hidden. You may fear expressing needs because you anticipate rejection. You may sabotage closeness because you expect abandonment. And so shame creates self-fulfilling prophecies. The very fear of being unworthy leads to behaviors that prevent connection, which in turn reinforces the shame. Even in everyday decisions, shame has a quiet influence. It can dictate what clothes you feel safe wearing, how you speak up in meetings, how much you smile in public. A compliment may be brushed off instead of accepted because the part of you shaped by shame doesn't believe you deserve it. It can also trap you in comparison, constantly measuring your worth against others, always coming up short. What we don't often realize is that these patterns aren't just habits, they're shame at work. But how does shame take root in the first place? Much of it begins in early environments. Children are deeply sensitive, and when they are shamed, whether through harsh words, humiliation, neglect, or constant criticism, they internalize the message that love and safety are conditional. The child brain cannot distinguish between "I made a mistake" and "I am a mistake." This distortion becomes a core belief that carries into adulthood. Without awareness, people keep living through the lens of that belief. Breaking free from shame requires more than just telling yourself to stop feeling it. Shame is not just a thought, it's an embodied experience. It lives in the nervous system, in the tightening of your chest when you're about to speak up, in the avoidance of eye contact, in the urge to shrink or hide. To heal shame, you have to begin by noticing these reactions with compassion rather than judgment. The act of naming shame is powerful. When you can pause and say, "This is shame speaking," you loosen its grip. It shifts from being the invisible director to being an actor you can see clearly. Once you see it, you can choose whether to follow its script. Shame thrives in secrecy, but it weakens in the light of awareness. Another crucial step is cultivating self-compassion. Often the harsh inner critic is simply shame's voice. Self-compassion doesn't mean excusing mistakes or ignoring growth. It means relating to yourself as you would to someone you love. Imagine how you would comfort a child who feels unworthy. Would you criticize them further, or would you reassure them they are still worthy of love? Extending that same kindness inward can begin to rewrite the deep script of shame. Another subtle but powerful way to weaken shame is through embodiment. Practices like mindful breathing, yoga, or even simple grounding exercises remind you that you can inhabit your body without fear. Because shame often drives people out of their own presence, back into their heads, or into self-criticism, returning to the body is an act of reclaiming. It reminds you that you are not just a mistake waiting to be fixed. You are a living being with sensations, breath, and aliveness. Imagine living without shame as the background noise of your life. You would pursue opportunities because you want to, not because you're trying to prove worth. You would allow yourself to rest without guilt. You would engage in relationships with authenticity, letting yourself be seen fully, trusting that love does not require perfection. You would stop hiding parts of yourself and instead live in wholeness. That freedom is possible when shame is no longer running your story. If you've recognized pieces of your own life in what I have shared, know that you are not alone. Shame is universal. Everyone carries it in some form. But universality doesn't mean permanence. Healing is possible. Each step you take in noticing, naming, and meeting your shame with compassion is a step toward reclaiming your full self. And every time you choose honesty over hiding, you loosen shame's grip just a little more. The journey of facing shame is not one anyone should have to do in isolation. By sharing and listening, we remind each other that being human includes imperfection, and that imperfection doesn't make us unworthy. It makes us real. If this conversation has resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so that we can continue building a community of people who choose self-awareness and compassion over silence and secrecy. Together, we can face what feels heavy and begin to live lighter, knowing we are not alone in this.